Hi there, it's Richard Marker at the Wise Philanthropy channel, and it's a pleasure to welcome you back. This discussion is part two of the one that I began a while ago on the big lies, both the opportunities and the dilemmas for philanthropy at this time. Now, just a very quick summary of part one, in case you haven't had a chance to view it yet. In that session, I talked about some of the tremendous challenges that are emerging in American society and probably around the world as well at this time in history. There is such cynicism about trust in institutions and governments. There's a question of how you determine what facts are. What really is true, what's not true, what the mediating factors are to get there, and the recognition that only philanthropy has the opportunity to have the long-term view without worrying about quarterly reports, without worrying about plebiscites, without having to be accountable for short-term decisions. Now, that's an advantage that's unique to philanthropy, and it's one that we have celebrated for a long time. And it's particularly important today to remember that, because if there's ever been a time when we have to step above the fray or beyond the fray to say, how do we address these kinds of things, it is now. So in part one, I talked about those unique opportunities and the responsibility, almost the mandate that we have at this time to be willing to do those, to take that kind of long systemic view. In this discussion, I want to talk about the dilemma of taking that view, given developments in the world and in the philanthropy world in particular over the last period of time. So what I want to say to get to the bottom line before we get into the detail is that the very autonomy that we have is exactly one of our dilemmas. Why do I say that? Because one of the things that we've learned over the last several months, something that we've been aware of for a long time, is that the very autonomy that we have, especially financially, but even structurally, the power imbalance that we have, the ability to function without having to be accountable, except for some broad legal parameters for our decisions, is also something that has been challenged on an ethical basis, a moral basis, and a response and an effectiveness basis. Because after all, we have power. We're the ones that decide where money goes. The people that want money have to come to us, and they have to petition us for resources. If we don't work hard to counter the power imbalance there and the structural imbalance there, then we are not likely to be able to make good decisions about the use of our money. It means we're only getting a distorted perspective. Moreover, if we're really being honest, a very significant amount of money that goes into the philanthropy world is money that was obtained through a somewhat rigged system. That doesn't mean that everybody who became rich did it in an unethical fashion, or in an illegal fashion, or an abusive fashion. But it does mean that often, not always, often the ability to accumulate significant resources is because we could benefit from opportunities that were not available to many other segments of society. And so if we don't recognize that imbalance, not only of the power imbalance, but even the economic imbalance that got us there, we are starting from we are not fully recognizing the distinct challenge that we have. Moreover, we've seen during the pandemic of the last number of months, at this point it's getting close to 10 months, that philanthropy's very system of operations was not well equipped to respond to short-term kinds of needs that exist right now. Government, for whatever reasons, that's a whole different discussion about whether government could have been better. Most of us think it could have been, but it wasn't. And there are short-term disaster type needs that we saw, not only because of the pandemic, but a recognition of what was well known, but came to the surface, the racial and economic inequities that are so pervasive in American society and in other societies as well. So if we in philanthropy want to be responsive to these kinds of things, we have to have ways of making it safe for people to tell us the truth. We have to show that we have real confidence in the institutions who are working closer to the ground, whose understandings and perceptions of what real needs are will always go beyond ours when we function within our figurative or often literal ivory towers. So one of the things that we've learned is we need trust-based philanthropy. We need to not only trust our grantees, our partners, but we have to make it safe for them to trust us and make it safe for us to trust them. We also understand that if we want to make good decisions, we have to involve them in participatory grant-making process. Decision-making is crucial. Otherwise, we're just simply carrying on with a kind of a greenwashing overlay of the power imbalance that exists before. But the dilemma is not whether that's the right corrective to make. There's no question it's the right corrective to make. The question is, the more we do that, the less long-term independent perspective we have. In other words, if the demand on our resources is to be responsive now to, or when I say now, I don't just mean tomorrow, I mean over the next few years, it often may limit our ability to step back and do those long-term systemic overviews that address the deep-seated problems of society, that don't lend themselves to immediacy, that don't lend themselves to the kind of short-term, on-the-ground kinds of needs that we see right now. Now, let me be fair. Those of you that are listening to this say, but wait a minute, are they inherently contradictory, that you can do both things, that you can walk and talk at the same time, or walk and chew gum at the same time, whichever metaphor you want to use? Of course you can do those kinds of things, but it requires a particular awareness and self-awareness and sensitivity to be willing to have resources go two places simultaneously, to address short-term kinds of needs with a level of trust, providing ongoing, often unrestricted support for institutions that are doing real work, for learning how to make it safe for them to tell us the truth so that we can make good decisions about that. And at the same time, reserving some of what we do to address the kinds of longer-term questions that are not going to be addressed with on-the-ground kinds of needs at the present time. That if there's an argument for the uniqueness of philanthropy in our sector, the autonomy that comes with it, is precisely that we can do both of those things and must do both of those things. But we can only do those things if we acknowledge that at this unique moment in history, and maybe it's not such a unique moment in history, it just happens to be a very frightening moment in history, that at this moment in history, that the world needs us. If we're serious about what we're about, if we take our role as philanthropists and foundations seriously, we have to be willing to operate on both sides at the same time. The long view, looking at systemic, long-term issues that have been a problem in American society and in much of the rest of the world for a very long time, and at the same time recognize that there are those who cannot and must not have to wait, that they need our resources now, they know how to use them now, and they need what only we can provide while we're doing our advocacy, while we're taking long-term perspectives in making the world a better place.